Pastor Chip this morning is going to be preaching to us using inspiration from the story. Well, I was going to say the prodigal son, but it's really about the other son. Pastor Chip will tell you about that too. But I want to read that scripture for you this morning from Luke chapter 15. Here it is. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father. I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet, and get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now, his elder son was in the field. And when he came and approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked, 'What was going on?' He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has got him back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I've been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who's devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him?' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" May the Lord add his blessing to the reading, hearing, receiving, and acting upon his word. Amen.
Leave a message after the tone.
Hey, Dad. It's me. Man, I know it's been a long time since we talked. I was kind of hoping you'd answer, but I understand you probably don't want to talk to me. I've just gone so far, and the things I've done, I just regret it, you know? And I know how bad I've hurt you and let you down, but Dad, I miss you. I miss how we drive around and just talk about life. And I just want to come home. But I know you've probably written me off. I can't blame you, actually. Here's the thing. It's kind of a shot in the dark, but I'm coming through town soon, and I'd really just like to see you. I know I can't just show up at the front door like I used to, but if you want to see me, just hang a small sheet out on the porch. And if the sheet isn't there when I drive by, I'll keep going, and I'll try not to bother you anymore. I love you, Dad.
was sitting there getting a little emotional. I don't know. Homecoming, right? That's what we're going to be talking about today. I want to greet all of you who are worshiping with us online right now. We don't know where you are, or sometimes we don't know who you are. We got to fix that, okay? So please don't just sit there and observe. Would you get in the chat right now? Pastor Kurt's in there. Nikki will be there later, outreach coordinator. Sometimes one of our leaders, Flora's in there. They're there to interact, to connect, to know who you are, where you're worshiping from. So give a shout out in the chat in there, okay? Sometimes I actually have my phone up here. Well, I actually do. And sometimes I talk back to you guys when I can not be enraptured and everything, but we really want to know where you are and how we can take next steps together, okay? I was on a Zoom call about 3 months ago with a family in Mexico that asked if I would do some marriage counseling because they've been worshiping with us for 9 months. So we don't know who's there, and if you're there, I just love this opportunity to be together. So I want to introduce a special guest. He's going to greet us and just say a few words to us. You've heard so much about our Vision 2020 team. During 2020, when everybody was hunkered down, we had 12 people that really were pressing and seeking God's direction. What does it mean to widen the circle? How are our values being constructed? And what's God saying to us for the next 10 years? And you've heard a whole Lent and Easter series on a Renaissance of reconciliation. We just spent time with our measures, how we measuring, how we're doing. But Mike Williams was our consultant. I feel like we're in the book of Acts sometimes. You know how Paul would go visit a church and Barnabas would visit a church, and we'd know we're just one church. And Mike came in and he worked with us for a year and with our team and helped us produce this. And Mike and his wife Kenna are with us today. Give a big shout out to them. And so I want Mike to just at least say a word to us after working with us.
You know, we sang there's nothing better than God, but for somebody who has been with Garfield, at least 12 people from Garfield, in video sessions for 40 hours, there's nothing better than being live with my Garfield friends. I've only met Pastor Chip, Pastor Terry, I met Pastor David earlier, and I met Dre, and I'm looking forward to meeting some other members of the Vision team. It was such an incredible experience. There were so many times we just sensed that God's presence was with us. Now, all that you've heard about as far as the mission, the vision, and all those things, the Vision team didn't come up with that. They uncovered it. It's you. It's always been you. It's always, you see, God's mission is not something that we decide we're going to do. It's something we decide we're going to accept. And you've got a mission like no other church. You've got a vision like no other church. Your mission is connect diverse people who share a common brokenness with Jesus. And your 10-year vision, that's incredible. A renaissance of reconciliation. You are the only church that can have that vision that God has prepared for you. And a lot of it has to do with your pastors. It has to do with where you're at. And it has to do with the people who make up this church. And right at that sweet spot is your mission. It has been a real privilege to be with you guys. And it's really exciting to chance to talk with some of you. Even if you weren't on the Vision team, I'd love to meet with you. You welcomed us so well. The worship was so excellent. And last week I peeked at Pastor Chip because whenever I go to a church, I want to know what the pastor wears. And it was, I got in on the message, and it was so great to share that. Thank you. I'm glad to be a part of this, man. Appreciate you.
There's a rule in preaching, you don't ever put people up that preach better than you, so that was your last time ever speaking at Garfield before me. You can do the benediction from here on out. Hey, my wife and I, we're going to lead our sixth tour to the Holy Lands next February. We've led 2 here at Garfield, one in 2017, one in 2019. And during this craziness of this past year and a half, basically, my wife said to me, Chip, I got to get back to the Sea of Galilee. I got to get back to Jerusalem. I got to walk where Jesus walked. And so we've put that out there. There's some brochures you can get online. We've got a few people already said they're going to be joining us. But why is that? Why is Terry feeling that beckoning? Because it's a call to go home, right? It's a call to put our feet in mystical waters. And I had a conversation with a Bedouin shepherd in Bethlehem. Now, I don't know about you, but when you talk to a shepherd from Bethlehem, Like, that's a good person to pay attention to. What, you all missed the Christmas story? What's going on in here? Like, Bethlehem, shepherd. Oh, yeah, I get it, right. And I was speaking to him a little bit about shepherding in their culture. Like in America, I'm not a farmer, I'm a city guy. But in shepherding in America, it's a little more commercialized. It's more technological with barns and advancements and et cetera. But in a lot of parts of the world, shepherding is the same way it was in the first century. And Israel is one of those. And the Bedouin shepherd, they live in tent camps. They're still at the bottom of the social ladder, just like they were when the angels came and spoke to them. And there was a point in that, if you've heard me preach on Christmas. And I was talking to this Bedouin shepherd, and he opened my eyes to something that was very interesting. Because I asked, what's it like? I mean, in today's day and age. And, and he said, well, we're still doing it the way we did. And what happens is, in a place like Israel or in Africa or other places where it's a very, very arid climate, you are utterly dependent on the land. You don't manufacture environments. They don't do that like in our commercial areas with, steroids and other things. Everything is extremely natural. And so as the climate changes, the location changes. And so they are very, very nomadic. And that's why they live in tent camps, because during the summer months, which are excruciating hot in Israel, we go in February for a reason, that they have to take the flocks way up in the mountains where there's still snow, where there's it's cooler air, grass is still growing. And so they migrate all the time. But by the time they start to head back to Bethlehem, if you go with us and you see the shepherd's fields in Bethlehem, they're so luscious. Our tour group gets to do something that most don't. We literally get to go down into the caves, which would have been the barns. We may have been the cave where the shepherds were that heard the first story. We don't know. But this Bedouin shepherd said to me, no matter where we've gone in the cycle, it doesn't matter if the sheep have been way up in the mountains. It doesn't matter if they've been through rough terrain. It doesn't matter if they've been through the heat or storms and they're soaking wet. When they begin to come back toward home, there's an excitement and an anticipation. You can feel it, he says, in the herd. They begin to murr. They're chomping at the bit, right? They're like Cleveland fans when we won Game 6 and we had a chance. It's like you're thinking about it, right? And it's palpable. And Jesus said, I am the good shepherd and you are the... Yeah, come on. 3 people knew that. That's really good. It was 1 when I got here, so we're moving. That was 17 years ago. Maybe in 15 years it'll be 6. Anyhow, we're the sheep. And I've said when Jesus called us sheep, that was no compliment. Like, sheep are dumb. Like, they get in trouble all the time. They wander off. Their vision isn't very good. But there's something about knowing that we're inching back toward home. Do you know that's why you're here? Do you know what it was like at 9 o'clock today with our heritage audience, folks who were more in the at-risk categories and couldn't be in physical worship for 15 months? And this was the first Sunday back for them. And I got to tell you, man, whew. We saw people getting out of cars, and there were young families, and there were people in walkers. And I'm going to tell you, the people in walkers were walking faster than me. They're going to get in the house of the Lord. And I told them, what's up with y'all? I mean, there's better food other places in Cleveland than here. There's a lot better views up by Lake Erie. But there's something about coming home spiritually. See, the past year and a half, the past 15 months, now I do not believe that God brought the pandemic. He might have. That's in his economy, understand. But I don't look for God's fingerprints on every disaster that happens. But I'll tell you this, whatsoever happens, God is in all things working for good. And he has been speaking to us for 15 months. My wife said to me in April, after we'd been shut down a month and we knew that this sucker was going to be not just a flash in the pan, it was going to be a long time. She said, Chip, I just think God is saying to the world, do you need me now? Because we're stripped away of everything that we call home. I mean, I was born to Phyllis Freed. She was born on Christmas Day. Like I was born to the ghost of Christmas present on steroids. And this was the first year in the history of my soon-to-be 59 years that on Thanksgiving and Christmas I was not with anyone except my wife and my kids. Everything that we held dear, right? That song, Everything I Once Held Dear. Like, it was stripped away. All the things that we think matter. All the things that we think make, fulfill us. That's why Jesus said, do not let up your treasure on earth. And we always talk about that as money. No, no, no. He said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Don't invest yourself spiritually and emotionally and finally psychologically where thieves can steal and moths can eat things up and rust can consume. But lay up your treasure in your Father's house. And that's why we're here, and that's why you're with us online, and we're connected. It doesn't matter. The circle continues to widen. Why? Because we know that in this world we're homeless, ultimately. See, when Jesus tells this parable, and I'm going to try to give you two little wrinkles on it. I've preached on this so often, but two little wrinkles maybe you haven't thought about any of it. But one of those is when Jesus was talking about this parable of the prodigal son and the stuck-up brat, he was talking about the human condition. It wasn't just a little story in like Aesop's fable. He was saying that all of us know we're finally homeless, right? All of us know that we've been in exile. The Garden of Eden, we were there and we were home and we were with God and we could walk with God and we had meaningful work tilling the garden and we had great wisdom and counsel to speak to our minds and we had the affirmation and the arms and the love of God to give us that love and acceptance that we've all been looking for. We had it all, but just like this younger son, we said, no, no, no. I need to call the shots for my life. I get to decide what's right and wrong for me. And we attach ourselves, that's what I said, to other things. And we find ourselves lost. And so in this past 15 months, friends, God has been getting alone with us. God has been wooing us back. God's been saying you need to begin to rethink about when you have these yearnings, these longings for something. It's a search and it's a longing for me. And God has been wooing us. And I love what C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis once said that one of the reasons that we feel this kind of displacement, he says, why we get so nostalgic. Memories, right? We remember things wonderfully. How many of you know things were never as wonderful as you remember them? My son, I love all my children. My middle son is my mini-me. He acts up, and he always says, people say my dad exaggerates. My dad does not exaggerate. He said he just remembers big. That's how we are with nostalgia, right? We remember big. Like all of us have that place or that thought or those things. Like if we could just get back to that. That's a sign of exile. People in exile are always looking for the golden years. And they're always back there somewhere. The food was better, the company was better. For me, it's Moffett, Quebec. Moffett, Quebec is where I grew up fishing. 4 years old, started going there, was a licensed guide in Quebec by the time I was 12. We would spend summers there. Back up then, I got up into those mystical waters. I felt the closest to God. That's why I'm still a nutty fisherman. I can't wait for the border to open. I can get back up and get north. And I've been all over the place. I've been up near the Arctic Circle. I was stuck in a blizzard on July 4th. So I'm nuts. But there's something that's seductive to me of being up there. We can drink right out of the lake and there's no phones and there's no email and nature is beautiful and you eat what you catch. And so in 1998, I decided to my wife, I figured my boys were old enough. I was going to take them to Moffett, Quebec. 1998, Perry was 7, Matthew was 4. Tiana was 16. The last place 16-year-olds want to go is Moffett, Quebec. But by God, I'm going to take my kids and show them what it's like to really be close to God. So Tiana talked me into taking our niece Shasta with us because she didn't want to be the only 16-year-old. And so off we went as a family, and we went up there. I had looked online. The camp I grew up in was called Camp Driftwood, and there was a new French couple that had bought the area, and they called it Domaine Driftwood. And I said, we're going to go this place. We went to this place. We pulled up, and we got a picture. This is what I saw at the top of the hill. That wasn't the camp that I grew up in. In fact, they had hot tubs. They had hot food. They had toilets that worked. They had a sauna. They did facials. You don't do facials on a fishing trip to Canada. And they met at the door. Now, Tiana and Shasta were looking in and said, man, I said, they'd like you. No! Where's the original camp? And they were so sweet, and with kind of broken English, they said, well, it's down below. I mean, you're welcome to stay there, but you see, no, we need to be down below. So we went down below to the old camp that they were getting ready to destroy. Here's a picture of me and my boys by the old lodge. Matthew looks so happy, right? He broke his arm before we went. And just pan out from that to the next one, and you'll see what a Taj Mahal that was. So that's where I wanted to be. And here's the next picture. Terry and Tiana are by the outhouses. Oh, God, I'm married to such wonderful. You see the fake smiles? They're like, good God, Mom, did you not know there's a hot tub up the hill? And Matthew and Perry go out with me. They get hooks in themselves, hooks in me. They were too young to be up in Moffat, Quebec, but by God, that's where you're close to God. And then Tiana and Shasta, they go out fishing with me. We cook walleye every night. But I know daggone well at 10 o'clock in their cabin, they snuck up to those hot tubs. Don't clap for them. Do not encourage. My daughter is watching online. But what's the problem? Lewis says that when you're yearning back for that, you're really not yearning for that place. You're yearning for what it points to. And see, those memories that are way better on that, Lewis said it this way in a beautiful quote. He said that when we're seeking things like this, what it is, it's the scent of a flower we've not yet found. It's the echo of a tune we've not yet sung. It's news from a country we've not yet visited. That's why I agree. That's why we're hungry to get home. That's why there's this yearning in us. That's why the sheep get restless. That's why we get restless. That's why you're back. Now, I know people exploited it. There were politicians who've never darkened the door of a church saying, oh, Walmarts are open, the churches are closed. They don't care, but we do. We needed to be together. We know the church never closed, but the building did. But we online, and now we're not realizing all these places. And I was telling the 9 o'clock audience, I was talking to somebody back for the first time, and she was greeting, and she said, Chip, for a year, I've had church walking my dog. And she said, neighbors would stop me, and I'd say, wait a minute, I need to pause my church. And it caused all these conversations. And she said, you know what? That church is never going to go. If I'm late to coming to church, or whatever. See what I'm saying? We found ways to stay connected because we're like those sheep. We're excited. We're anticipating coming home. And that's what Jesus said. Now here's a little perspective. Where Jesus is saying, you all have this hunger, but there's a problem with some of you. Some of you can't get over yourselves to come back in. See, when Jesus told this parable, it was not in a vacuum. In fact, it was 3 parables. And he was talking to a particular group of people. You see it because the beginning of Luke chapter 15, here's what it says. It says, now all of the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him. And, here we go, the Pharisees and the scribes. You're here today. You always are. I'm glad you're here. Welcome home. Right? Somebody said becoming a Pharisee is like eating at Denny's. Nobody means to do it. You just end up there. And some of us just kind of end up there, We didn't mean to be so judgmental and mean, and we didn't mean to do it, but it just happened, and God bless you for here. But Jesus is speaking to you and to me, because I've been there many times. Maybe I slip into there now. And they're what? Grumbling, saying, we don't like who he hangs out with. We don't want to go in with them, right? And Jesus tells 3 parables. First one said there was a shepherd that had 100 sheep. One got lost. And the shepherd left the 99 to go find the one. And when he found it, in his joy, he threw it up on his shoulders and brought it back home. He said the kingdom of heaven is like a woman who lost one coin, just one coin out of her whole family treasury. But she was so upset at that lost coin that she tore the house apart. She looked under the sofa, under the carpet, everywhere she could find until she found that coin and brought it back to the family treasury. And said to her neighbors, come and celebrate with me. And then Jesus said, here's a man with 2 sons, and one went and got lost. And nobody went to find him. Shepherd went, find the lost sheep. Woman went, find the lost coin. Nobody went to find the lost son. Nobody went. And Jesus was holding up a mirror to the Pharisees. You know why? Because in that day and age, they had something called the law of primogeniture. And what that meant was there was somebody who was supposed to go find the lost son. Per this law, do you know who it was? His older brother. That's the law of primogeniture. That the oldest son, now this is a patriarchal society. My sisters are 13 and 9 years older than me. They would not have done well in that society, and they beat me up every day to remind me of it. But this is back, 2,000 years when it was male-dominated, right, in a very sinful way. But they had this law of primogeniture. Whoever was the oldest son, the oldest child, the heir to the father, it was their job to keep the family together. That's why they got the lion's share of the wealth, of the inheritance. It was their job to protect the family asset. It was their job to protect the family. And if one went and got lost, it was their job to go and find him, but he didn't go. And Jesus is holding up the mirror, saying, I know you all are grumbling because you're not doing your job, so that I have to come and do it for you. During the Vietnam War, I did research years ago. There was a Life magazine article in 1965 about an American soldier who went MIA in Vietnam. Some of you, I'm a child of the 60s, so I was born in the 60s. That makes me a child of the 60s, not like Pastor Terry. Our pastor hippie, been to Woodstock. I remind, all online, yes, our pastor went to Woodstock. So if you don't tune in or come here, you are missing out, Jack. But, in the 60s, you heard a lot of the Vietnam people, MIA and POWs and all these things. And this kid was MIA, and the family was a wreck, and the parents were following the government. You know what happened? His older brother said to his parents, I'll go find him. He took all of his savings, he got on a plane, he went to Vietnam, and he searched for his brother. Never found him. But you know what happened? Both sides, the Viet Cong and the American soldiers, knew about this. And they just referred to him as the brother. And they said, if the brother comes on, he was behind enemy lines. And both sides said, if the brother comes on the battlefield, we must cease from fighting. He was doing his job. But we weren't doing our job to bring people to the feast, to return people to the fold. See, I told you in April in 2020, when I preached an Easter toolkit for surviving a pandemic, I told you the rest of our preaching and teaching for the following year is going to be about getting you ready for the other side of this, because the world is going to need people who believe Jesus, that they are the light of the world, the salt of the earth, the yeast in the dough, that we are to be that corrupting element to infiltrate the powers of evil. Jesus said, I will build my church and it will tear down the gates of hell, not erect new ones. And I knew that we needed to be, tending to our own spirituality so we could get back out there. Because as we sat in our homes and we realized that God did not design a world of plagues, God did not design a world of death, and we were forced to look at these continued acts of racial injustice, we said, God did not create that in the human family. And we looked at it and we see division and we see hate and we see polarization, and we were forced to sit down and look at it and say, God did not create that world. I'm homeless in that world. I'm disenfranchised in that world. I refuse to live in that world. And now it's time for Garfield. You heard Mike say, you heard our vision, we got to trigger a renaissance. Do you ever heard of the Renaissance? You studied in high school, right? We know that people are trying to whitewash our education today, but don't believe it. We won't go there. Forgetting your history means you are destined to repeat it. But there was a Renaissance, and I studied it. I did some diligence for this message, and when the Renaissance, every scholars debate how long it lasted, where and when it really was, but they are unified in one thing, that the Renaissance followed what they called the evil of the Dark Ages, of the Middle Ages. They call it specifically the crisis of the late Middle Ages. English is my second language. It took me a while to put that together. But you know what the crisis was of the late Middle Ages? It happened in the 14th century. Some called it the Great Mortality. Some called it the Great Plague. Some called it Black Death. It was the bubonic plague. It hit the world in the 14th century and spread across the world. Do you know at the time of the bubonic plague, the population of the earth was 475 million people? Toward the end of the bubonic plague, it was 350 to 375 million people, per who you believe. 21 to 26% of the world population died. And there was what scholars say a great upheaval, socially, economically, politically, and spiritually. Hello. And the world was shaken. Spirits were crushed. See, that's what's been happening to us. There's been a crushing physically. I get it. Okay? Believe me, I've got somebody in that number of the near 600,000 people of my own flesh and blood, right? Like it was an attack physically, but people's spirits have been crushed. You don't believe me? There was a study that came out recently by a group associated with Barna that did a study and looked and said that 35% of pastors in the past year have either left ministry or considered leaving ministry. Now, I think that's low. I've been counseling pastors during this pandemic, a group in Syracuse, a group in Atlanta, a group in Columbia and St. Louis, Missouri, and about 30% of them that started with me are doing different jobs now. And I said, it's not 35% because 35% of people admitted it, right? Do you know what they're saying to us as pastors nationally? They're saying, understand that after this 15 months, 20 to 25% of who was in your church before it are left. But they're just gone from faith. Another 20 to 25% joined other churches because they're just wandering. And you've got a new 25% people you haven't even met yet. Hello, love you guys. You know, they're here with us. We've seen that. I don't know. This has been an attempt to crush our spirit. That's why Paul said, I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I kept my faith. And the world needs us to go out there. There's people crushed in spirit. And they don't need our help. They don't need Pharisees and scribes grumbling against them. They need people that are walking out there as meals on wheels of Jesus Christ for life-changing grace and love and saying, come and meet the man like the woman at the well. Come in our common brokenness, because I'm broken too, and connect with Jesus. But this older brother heard the music playing and refused to go in. I'm going to tell you, friends, if everything I've been through in the past year, I'm going to go in. If nobody goes with me, I'm going to go in. If it takes me to cross barriers and I don't care if they're singing in Latin, I don't care if they're singing in Swahili, I don't care if they're doing Gregorian chants, I'm going to go in. I don't care if I have to have a capitalist in my left hand and a socialist in my right, I'm going to go in. I don't care if they tell me I shouldn't go in because the wrong people are there. Well, you can stay up outside with your stuck-up self, but I'm going to get outside of myself and I'm going to go in. I'm going to be in that place where people will come from north and south and east and west and sit and recline and break bread and teach hope and build love and give forgiveness and give justice and do the right things at that place. I'm going in. You may not go in with me, but I'm going in. We're called, friends, to go in, to go into this place. That's our calling. Because this younger brother, he got a Pharisee for an older brother. But you and I get Jesus, our true older brother. And he didn't fly from the United States to Vietnam. He came from heaven to earth. He went into exile. He said, foxes have holes, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He became exiled. He was crucified outside the gates. Why? So that we could come in. He paid the ultimate price. He gave everything he had so that we could come into the feast, so that we could be with God. Today, we're gonna close this. We get 7 minutes here. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to spend some time with communion. You say, well, wait a minute, Chip, we had communion last week, so? Yeah. Did I tell you I'm going in? Yes. And that's what Jesus left us. He left us true communion, and an ability of living together. True communion. See, and why did he give us this meal? It's one of the few things he told us to do kind of religiously, right, routinely. Like he said, care for the poor, do justice, all those things, walk humbly with God. But it was like one of the few routines he gave us to remember that table. Why? Because that's our future. that we're called to come into the party. We have to celebrate. We have to invite others to come with us. We can't be, Jesus said to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, he said, no, not only do you make people in your preaching more fit for hell than they are for heaven. That's what he said. He said, but you also stand in the doorway of the kingdom and block others from getting in. It is our call to follow our true and better elder brother who surrendered everything to get to the feast. And we need to be those kind of people. This world needs us right now to build that table of fellowship, to trigger what happened after the Dark Ages, which was called the Rinascita. That's what it was called in Italian. Do you know what happened after all that plague, bubonic plague took so many people? You would be surprised to find out that everybody started to finger point and blame game of who was responsible. We haven't heard anything like that. Right? Do you know who the list was that they blamed? You ready? Jews. Friars. Like Friar Tuck, what did he do to anybody? Like they blamed friars. They blamed foreigners and immigrants. Never heard that. It's their fault, right? They blamed the poor. They blamed beggars. They blamed the homeless. They brought the bubonic plague. But the number one culprit in Europe, they thought, were lepers. Leprosy was very prevalent back then. Do you know I had to study this, and I found out that there were almost no lepers left in Europe after the bubonic plague because of mass murder and execution. They wiped out the entire leper colony. Not the bubonic plague, but the plague of hate in our heart. But then came the Rinascita, the Renaissance. That was an Anglicized version of that the word Rinascita. And what happened? People started seeking the truth. Not false narratives, not conspiracy theories, not UFOs. Maybe they're real, I don't know. But seeking justice and kindness and love. They were looking for truth in science and in theology and in philosophy and in the arts. There became a new appreciation for music and art and beauty. And a renaissance emerged. And civility reappeared. And people started actually getting nice to one another again. Are you willing to go in? I'm going in. I don't care if I have to wear a mask, I'm going in. I don't care if I have to wear a tuxedo, I'm going in. I don't care if I need to wear Bermuda shorts and embarrass my wife, I am going in. Don't sit out when you hear the music play. Leah, would you help us? Don't sit out when you hear the music play. We sing for all the saints sometimes, a great hymn of the church, and I say when the warfare's, steady and the strife is long, steals on the ear a distant triumph song. When you hear the music, come on in. That's what happened to that younger man. He was sitting there in a pig pen, sitting there in a place of uncleanliness, sitting there in this, all of a sudden, this place, and it said he came to himself. And I just dream in my mind, because I am still in the spirit of worship. I think he said, in my Father's house, he turns graves into gardens. He turns mourning to dancing. He turns pig pens to paradise. He's the only one who can. And he got up and he returned. Friends, keep returning. Return again, again, again. Come to this table. Come to this table. All of you have received this is our post-corona communion. Written, sealed up just for you. Anybody not received these? Throw your hand up if you don't have one. We'll have an usher or somebody come and bring it to you. Hey, how did you get these when you came here today? Somebody? Somebody gave it to you. And I heard a greeter saying, it is my joy to celebrate communion with you today. Online, if you have some water or cracker or bread, it is our joy to celebrate communion with you, to celebrate this connection with you. And I want us to celebrate. I want us to celebrate this table. This is not a Garfield Memorial table. This is not a Methodist table. This is not a church table. This is a table of Jesus Christ. We don't get to decide who gets to come and doesn't come. That's not our work. It's not my table. Anybody tells you you can't come to the table forgets whose table it is. So there's free access. Whiny older brothers, ornery younger brothers. And I'm not going to let you sisters off the hook. That's reverse sexist language I'm using right now. Now, all of us, broken, common brokenness. This is your table. Jesus said, I'm here for you. Here's